Reaper looked out onto a city, or at least part of a city. The room beyond them stretched away from Reaper as far as they could see and then some. The walls to either side 100 feet away in both directions, it was like a hallway for giants. The space was filled with the aftermath of a catastrophe. Crumbling buildings stretched upwards from the ground far below Reaper to the ceiling far above their head. Rubble and debris littered the streets, which seemed to run diagonally across the space, buildings at angles to the walls around them. Vegetation had reclaimed the area, moss and vines weaving a tapestry of age through busted windows and cracks in cement. Trees pushed up through pavement, roots carving paths through and under asphalt. Patchy grass clung to life wherever it could find purchase. And all of it was deathly still. There was no wind to rustle leaves nor howl through empty buildings. No creatures skittered in and out of rusted sewer grates, and no people peeked warily out of darkened doorways. It was like some god had carved a slice of reality out and placed it in this space far, far underground. "Welcome," Dr. Faulkner said, "to your training facility." A moment passed as Reaper took in the enormity of the space. "What is this place?" Reaper asked. "This is training facility R2-SR, and it can be whatever you need." "I don't understand." "This is where you will train for missions, learn new weapons, etc. As such, the space can adapt to whatever the situation requires of it. We were able to reverse engineer you and your, predecessor's biology and develop a technology which..." Dr. Agony cut in. "This place isn't real. It's made of nanobots that can assemble themselves to look and behave like whatever you want them to be." Faulkner sighed. "In simple terms, yes. The space can also interact with your integrated HUD so you can more easily see enemies, and so we can monitor more closely what you are doing." There was a pause. "So you can see what I see?" Dr. Faulkner replied quickly. "Yes, but only when you're in this chamber, or on a mission. Otherwise, the HUD should remain deactivated, and we can only see what you're seeing while you're in here." "Wait, how does that work?" "Well, you see, the superstructure of the nanobots acts as an amplifying matrix which..." Agony cut him off again. "It's complicated technical stuff, and also not the point right now. There is one more thing you need to know. Because you are made of the same stuff the nanobots are made of..." There was a pause. Presumably, Agony was suffering a withering glare from Faulkner. "Kind of. It lets us simulate combat. We don't want you to actually be damaged during training, but we can sure make you feel like you have been. For example, if you get shot, you will not actually be physically hurt, but we can make it feel like it. And if you're shot enough times in an area, let's say a limb, we can disable that limb. And if you really fuck up and die, then we end the training and you get to start over. This first training exercise is simple. There are a group of enemy combatants in the middle of the city, and they are hunting you. Your task is to eliminate them." Reaper stammered out a reply. "Wait, hold on. I don't have a weapon. Also, how many? Also, how do I even get down? Also, you just want me to kill people?" "When the training begins, we will highlight them on your HUD. As for getting down, I would suggest your wings. Failing that, there is a ladder. Also, they are not people. They are simulated, just like the rest of this place. Just think of them as robots. Oh, and you don't need a weapon. I think that you will soon find that you are a weapon." Agony piped up. "Oh, and if you think you can just hide, know that you aren't getting out of here until all of them are dead. Good luck." And with that, there was a click, and then silence. Reaper stood at the precipice of the space, and as they looked out through the slice of city, 8 red shapes appeared about 400 feet ahead of them. They tried to focus on the shapes, and to their surprise, their vision seemed to zoom in. They could now clearly see the outlines of people in the city below, presumably the soldiers Agony had mentioned. They relaxed, unfocusing their eyes and letting their vision return to normal. With a deep breath, they sat down on the edge, tentatively placed a foot on the ladder and began to climb. Once at the bottom, they took in their surroundings. The city that had seemed huge and sprawling from above now surrounded them with its enormity. Though huge bulbs set in the ceiling hundreds of feet up blazed light down onto them, the alleyways were dim. Leafy vines stretched taut between buildings, vegetation catching glare from above. Slightly translucent, the leaves glowed softly, casting mottled patterns of shadows onto streets below. Reaper crept forward, eyes focused on the red shapes in the distance. They saw the soldiers through the buildings like some sort of X-ray vision, and a small counter in the top right of their vision displayed the distance to them. As Reaper approached, they tried to think of a plan. The ground was strewn with rubble, but nothing would be an effective weapon. The only thing they could think of was to take one of the soldiers' guns somehow and use it on the others. They did have one advantage. They could see the soldiers, and the soldiers couldn't see them. Maybe, if they could hide somewhere, they could... The distance counter ticked below 100 feet, and the outlines disappeared from Reaper's vision. They stopped. The distance had been replaced by a message. In range. Perfect, they thought. If they weren't fucked before, they were definitely fucked now. Nevertheless, they kept moving forward. Agony said they were not leaving until the soldiers were dead, so they really had no other option. They tried to be as sneaky as they could, but without knowledge of where the soldiers were, they had to take each corner blind, just hoping there was nothing behind it. A minute went by, then 2. Had their own breathing always been this loud? They listened to their footsteps, boots crunching on rubble. Wait, they were barefoot. Why would they hear? They spun around, just as a soldier rounded the corner not 20 feet behind them. They bolted in the opposite direction, around the side of a nearby building and away from the soldier. They heard the soldier shout and the sharp crack of discharging weapons. Bullets whizzed past Reaper's head as they ran. They weaved between buildings, hoping to avoid the constant rain of death coming their way. Faulkner, Agony, a little help? Nothing. Both doctors were quiet. A piece of rubble stuck out of the ground ahead of them at an angle, forming a sort of ramp. Reaper scanned the buildings around them. No. There! One structure had a hole blown in the side of it about 3 stories up. It was directly in front of them, and the ramp pointed almost right to it. Hoping beyond hope, Reaper gathered as much strength as they could muster, and they took their first running steps onto the ramp. They focused on the spot where their wings connected to their back, feeling the muscles tense. Another step. They breathed in sharply and held it like they were trying to keep something from escaping, ready to channel it into the wings. Their feet found the edge, and they jumped. Reaper pushed off with all their gathered strength and felt their feet leave the ground. They seemed to hang for a moment in midair, and then crack, there was a searing pain and their body jerked forwards. The wings on their back whirred to life in a blink, and they unfolded themselves, spreading out behind Reaper. They glowed a soft blue, and as Reaper poured energy into them, the glow got stronger. The air around the blades shimmered and distorted like the space just above an asphalt road on a hot summer's day. Then whoosh, like some giant hand shoved them forwards, they not so gracefully soared towards the hole in the wall of the nearby building. Their arms flailed, spinning in the air, grasping for anything that might help keep them from tumbling head over heels. Luckily, their aim was good, and they didn't flatten against the side of the building. Instead, they rocketed through the hole and landed in a heap. Not on their head, which was nice, but nevertheless, the landing was not a graceful one. They hit on their side and slid across the rough concrete. Limbs tangled, and for a moment, sense of which way was up, lost. They skidded to a halt. Crumpled as they were, they took a moment to untangle themselves and regain their bearings. They sat up slowly, prodding different parts of their body. There would be bruises, but nothing seemed to be broken. As adrenaline faded, they began to feel a throbbing, pulsing pain emanating from their right leg. They looked down and saw a red glow surrounding their leg. Looking more closely, they saw it was like a tightly woven mesh of thin, red wire. It clung to Reaper's pants, pressed against the form of their extended leg and kept it from moving. They glanced at the blinking message on their HUD. Warning: leg damaged, limb functionality lost. Well, shit, Reaper thought. Now what? No way they were going to be able to do that again, and they couldn't exactly run anywhere. Then, Reaper heard the solid thumps of boots on stairs. The soldiers were coming into the building. Of course they were. In a panic, Reaper tried to remember. They hadn't really been paying attention to it, but they thought that maybe there were 2 more floors before the top of the building. But with their leg, they would never... They heard shouts. Okay, time to go, bad leg or not. They pulled themselves to their feet, grabbing a bent piece of rebar on the ground to lean on and began to hobble their way towards the stairs. It was a slow process, painfully slow. Their leg was held in an awkward extended position, and the extra weight of their wings, which they still were not quite used to, made them shamble awkwardly forwards. They limped and hobbled to the stairs, and using the handrail to pull themselves along, they began to climb. This was bullshit. How the hell had they expected them to do this? Take out an entire squad armed to what seemed like the teeth? It was crazy. Seething, Reaper made their slow way to the roof. The only reason they stood any chance of making it was the fact that the group did a thorough sweep of each floor before ascending to the next. Reaper mused that having military training hard-coded into you had its downsides. Even so, they were getting closer. It was only 2 flights of stairs, but it might as well have been a mountain. Nevertheless, Reaper stumbled, pulled, and grunted their way to the top. There was a hole in the wall where the door to the roof should have been, and Reaper staggered through it into artificial sunlight. The roof itself was empty, save for the little structure with no door that led to the stairs. Reaper tried to focus again on the spot where the wings connected to their body, but they couldn't concentrate as the throbbing in their leg kept distracting them. No way off the roof except a jump, which would be as bad if not worse than dealing with the soldiers. So they did the next best thing. They made their slow way around the back of the entrance to the stairs and crouched down behind the wall opposite the opening. Well, not exactly crouched, they more crumpled into a sweaty heap, but they liked to think they crouched there. It was at least a bit less embarrassing. Strangely, they took solace in knowing that Claire wouldn't see them like this. What a strange thought to have. What should it matter what Claire did or did not see? It was all lost in thought. Reaper almost missed the sounds of 8 pairs of boots stomping up the stairs and onto the ground behind them. Reaper sat, breathing heavily. The exit to the stairs was in the middle of the roof, so it wouldn't be long. All the soldiers had to do was come around the small structure, and there they would be. There was no way. They couldn't have seriously believed Reaper could take on anyone, let alone trained soldiers. It was Reaper's hand sunk into the floor. Their right hand, that they had been leaning on, squished into the concrete like it was wet clay. It wasn't a lot, but when they pulled back, they stared in astonishment at the distinct imprint on the floor below them. They touched the spot again, hard, like the concrete it was, but then they noticed their other hand. Not only was it sunken in, but there were little bits of rock floating around it. What the fuck, Reaper whined. They were so focused on this weirdness that they didn't even notice the 8 masked soldiers now surrounding them. They closed their eyes and focused, but not like before. They didn't know why, but they weren't trying to force energy to something. They were simply drifting, delving into some place they'd never been. The world faded away, replaced by the same world, but strange. There were the shapes of things, but they were wrong. They were there and they were not there, and Reaper thought they could hear whispering from all around them. They looked down to where their hand was, though it was less of a look, more a shifting of focus. Where their hand met solid concrete seemed to glow, and Reaper's mind was pulled towards the spot. They resisted at first, but then stopped, and let their mind be guided downwards. Their focus narrowed, and then exploded. They weren't touching the concrete, they were touching the building. No, the building was touching the street, and that was touching the other buildings, and the walls and the ground pressed in on those, huge, heavy, and then the surface, then the sky. They were touching the world, and it was overwhelming. The quiet whispers present before had become very loud, deafening. The voices screamed in their head. It was nonsense. It was secrets. It was everything. Every sidewalk, every tree, every building screamed its existence. And above them, so far above them, away from the planet, the eyes watched. They glared, angry, disgusted. Reaper was a twisted, mangled version of them, not one of them, but invading their space somewhere in another time. Bullets impacted their body. They registered as no more than dull thuds in Reaper's mind, and they went unnoticed in the sea of screams. Though it seemed impossible, the voices grew louder in Reaper's mind, each one begging to be known, each straining to be louder than the others. It was too much. Within and without their mind, Reaper screamed, and the world around them shattered. They opened their eyes. They were still on the roof. Beneath them, the ground was cracked and broken. The concrete had been pulled into spikes that stuck out of the ground around them and emanated out to the edges of the roof in rings like a shockwave. The structure leading to the stairs was gone. All that was left, a hole open to the lower floors. The soldiers were all dead, or, well, they'd never been alive, but they certainly weren't going to be shooting anyone anytime soon. Each was impaled on a spike, slumped over them like dolls or marionettes with their strings cut. Reaper glanced at their arms. Both were covered in the red netting that kept them from moving, and it was starting to spread over their chest. The ground under them buckled slightly, bowing down and in, and Reaper realized they were in a divot on the roof. The floor was lower here and sloped gently upwards towards the edges of the building. That would mean the floor was thinner here, and crack! The ground beneath Reaper gave way. Too slow to react and too tired to care, they fell, and in the last moments before unconsciousness, they saw rubble falling around them. Not just the roof, but the entire building was collapsing. Then they hit, and everything went dark. When Reaper woke, they were back in their room on their two-big bed. Their entire body was sore, and at first they didn't open their eyes. This was 2 times now that they had woken up in pain, and they made a mental note not to put themselves in those kind of situations in the future. What had happened? They remembered the training, going up the building, reaching the top. The soldiers had surrounded them, and then... oh God. And then the building, it fell onto... How were they alive? "Hey kid, you awake?" Claire's voice was soft and gentle. Reaper opened their eyes. "Yeah, everything hurts." "I can imagine. That was quite the stunt you pulled back there." Reaper sat up. "You saw what happened?" "Yeah, I finished my training a bit early, so they let me come watch you. That was some display. I did not know you could do that." Reaper took a moment, then responded. "Neither did I. Wait, can't you do that? Matter manipulation on that scale? No way, my head would probably explode. I mean, I heal myself, and I get my weapons out." She gestured to the cubes floating above her head. "But that's more muscle memory, I barely have to think about it. What you did, that's something on a completely different scale." Reaper looked down at their bed. "It was awful. I went somewhere with these voices, and there were these eyes." Reaper felt something roll down their cheek and realized they were crying. They looked up at Claire. "What is going on?" Claire looked very sad for a moment, and then her face shifted to something more consoling. She sat down next to Reaper on the bed. "I know, it's a lot right now, and it sucks, it really does, but I promise you it gets better." Reaper turned so their legs were off the bed and scooted closer to Claire. She put an arm around them. It felt nice having someone there. "Faulkner is weird, and Agony is an asshole, but after a while, it's not that bad. I'm here, and I'll try to answer any questions you have." Reaper looked up at her. I do have some questions. Ask away." Why would they make me go in there without a weapon? They didn't tell me anything, and they expected me to kill those things. Claire was silent for a moment. Agony is a very efficient man. He wants the new Reapers to be trained as fast as possible, and he thinks that putting you in what he calls helpfully strenuous situations will make you master your abilities faster. Like I said, he's a dick. But now you're past your first training, and you get to train with me. Reaper smiled slightly. Don't kick my ass too hard, please. I've already had a building fall on top of me. Claire chuckled. No promises, kid. Speaking of that, a building kind of fell on top of me. How am I alive right now? Claire nodded. You know this already, but you're not human. I mean, you have a human mind, but your body is... It's complicated. But you don't interact with matter the same way other people do. Mostly it's just small things. You're faster, jump higher, that sort of stuff, but you're also more resistant to damage. You heal faster, and sometimes... She trailed off. Sometimes you can scream and make giant concrete spikes that impale people? Yeah. So these people, Faulkner and Agony, they created me? Why? They said the world ended and that I would be going on missions. What would they need someone like me for? What happened to all the others and... Whoa, kid, slow down a bit. Yes, they created you, but it's not what you think. A long time ago, there were these things called ICs. No one really knows where they came from. They were like us, but stronger. What you did in training is nothing to them. Governments tried to use them, and there was a war, a bad one. The surface is kind of decimated, you saw that from your training, and most of the ICs were destroyed in the conflict, but some survived. There's a group of people, called the Protectorate, who are trying to use those that did to establish themselves as leaders of the new world or something dumb. Anyway, Artorias are making sure they don't take over everything and are trying to rebuild what's left of society. And we are the only ones who can fight ICs and win, so that's why they need us. Reaper stared at her. That's a lot, I know. And I was confused for a while as well. The gist is most of the missions we go get supplies, but sometimes we beat up crazy murder robots. One more thing. Is there any way to, put these away? Reaper gestured to their wings. They are really uncomfortable to sleep on. Claire laughed. I bet. Yeah, there is. I'll show you when we train. For now, though. She got up and turned to face them. May I? Reaper turned so their wings were facing Claire. They sat crisscross as she put a hand on the folded blades of the right wing. Reaper felt warmth on their back at the point where the wings met their flesh. Then, they suddenly felt much lighter. Reaper breathed out. They realized that they'd been holding their breath, and they turned around. Claire was smiling. How's that? Where? Claire pointed at the cubes bobbing gently in a circle above her head. Reaper reached up and felt in the air above their own head. Sure enough, their finger found a cube floating there. It felt strangely warm to the touch. They lowered their hand. Thank you. It's really nothing. Like I said, I'll teach you, but first, it's been a long day. You should get some sleep. She moved to leave, but Reaper looked up. Could you maybe stay with me? I'm kind of scared of what might happen if I go back to that place. She smiled warmly. Yeah, I think I can do that. She sat back down on the bed. Reaper lay down, and she did the same, putting an arm around them, comforting. You're gonna be okay. I promise. The sleep was more bearable without their wings. They snuggled up against Claire and found rest. After a few hours, the fluorescent light in the ceiling dimmed. They never shut off completely, but their brightness lessened and the light seemed to become warmer, easier on the eyes. The next morning, Reaper woke to find that Claire was still laying beside them. They sat up, careful not to disturb her, and stretched their arms. They'd got used to the weight of the wings, and without them, they felt a bit off balance. They looked at Claire. She'd rolled onto her back when they got up, and they watched her chest rise and fall slowly. She looked so peaceful. They stayed like that, watching her for a few moments until she grunted and slowly opened her eyes. She looked up at them, and Reaper realized they'd been staring. She sat up and grinned. "Hey, you were the one who wanted a sleepover." They looked away. "Do we get a change of clothes or something?" they asked. "Yep. Though what they give you is more of the same outfit you're wearing now. If you want something better, you'll have to find it yourself." "What? On missions?" She glanced up at the ceiling. "There's a whole world up there just waiting to be scavenged." "I thought, yeah, there's a mission objective, and they're always like, stick to the plan. But you'd be surprised how much downtime there is." Reaper laughed. "I guess you'll just have to take me shopping then." Claire smiled. "I guess I will. Now, time for breakfast. Faulkner told me we have the day off to rest today, so I guess I'll show you around." "That sounds much better than what I did yesterday. Also, breakfast?" "Mm-hmm. Change clothes if you want, then we can walk and talk on our way to the mess hall. I'll wait outside." Reaper changed and found Claire waiting outside their room. "Ready?" she asked. "Yeah." "Great. Follow me." As they made their way through the twisting halls of the underground complex, Claire talked. "We don't exactly have to eat, but we do need energy, and eating is the easiest way to do that. Our bodies convert food into energy way more efficiently than normal humans, so we don't have to eat a lot, but it does help keep up appearances." Reaper voiced a question. "You said easiest. If not food, then how do we get energy?" Claire grimaced. "It rarely ever happens, but if you're really running low, you know how you can manipulate matter? Well, if you assimilate something living, it'll get you a lot of energy and not a lot of time. But it's an unpleasant and messy process." Reaper gaped at her. "I've never done it, but R1, he was fond of it. He said it made him feel more alive. It was kind of crazy." Reaper stared at her. "How long did you—" She shuddered. "Too long. When he died, I was sad, of course, but it doesn't matter. Oh, hey, I have a surprise for you tonight, which I will tell you about when we don't have so much company." Reaper looked ahead. They'd reached the hallway leading to the mess hall, and Reaper could see Faulkner standing in the doorway, seemingly waiting for them. He perked up when he saw them and walked towards them as they got closer. "Ah, here comes Mr. Honor Guard himself. The one and only mission I went on where he was there in person. Faulkner was so paranoid about raiders that he ordered a bunch of soldiers to form a ring around him so he would be, quote-unquote, protected from every possible angle of attack." Reaper snorted. "I honestly don't think he's been outside the facility since then, on a mission or otherwise." Reaper looked at her. "He hasn't left? No wonder he seems a bit crazy?" she asked. Just then, he got to them. "Reaper and Claire, how very good to see you both. We have much to discuss. Please find a table. I will bring us all food." And with that, he left, almost skipping back into the mess hall. "He seems happy," Reaper mused. "Well," Claire responded, "as far as he's concerned, your test was a resounding success. I ran around for 15 minutes, then a building collapsed on top of me. Correction, you collapsed the building on top of yourself. I doubt he's ever seen that kind of power anywhere but the ICs. No wonder he's excited. Come on, we should find somewhere to sit." With that, they made their way inside. They found a table near the far right wall, furthest from where the soldiers, doctors, and presumably Faulkner were getting their food. The mess hall was crowded. Men and women in many different uniforms ate, talked, and laughed. There was a comfortable hum of chatter in the room, and Reaper found that they felt safer among so many people. Without the wings, they could get lost in a crowd, but alone, the eyes... They shuddered and looked at Claire, who was eyeing the food station. "Faulkner better bring us something good," she muttered. "Why aren't they staring at us?" She turned to them. They nodded at the crowd in the room. "I mean, we're supposedly living weapons capable of mass destruction, but they don't even seem to notice us." Claire nodded. "They do. but they're ordered to act like we're just normal people. None of them are looking at us. They're trying their hardest not to. They're following orders. Reaper looked down. Oh. So what if we don't actually blend in? I mean, it's not like any of them are going to try to pick a fight with us. And besides, standing out is cool. It's better to be an individual than to be one of the herd. Reaper kept their head down, I guess. Claire was about to say something more when Faulkner arrived with their food. He sat down and offered each of them a plate. Reaper looked up as Faulkner started talking almost before he sat down.
Reaper, what you did yesterday was marvelous. You will train with Claire, yes, and I see you've already learned to put the wings away.
He glanced at the cube floating above Reaper's head. Actually, that was Claire. Strangely, he looked almost happy to hear this.
No matter. All the more reason for you and Claire to train together. After yesterday, Agony wanted to send you on a mission right away, but I convinced him to give you two some time to train together, so that you could better use your powers. You know how he is. So, expect your first mission in about a week, and...
Claire started and interrupted him. A week? That's insane. I had at least a month of training before I went on a mission. You want me to train them in a week? Faulkner looked annoyed.
Yes, well, it's the best I could do. Agony was insistent that we get Reaper into the field as soon as possible so that we can minimize time between now and the final test. Plus, the Protectorate is on the move again. We think they're setting up an outpost by one of the pillars near the routes our supply caravans take.
Reaper had little to no idea what they were talking about, but they saw Claire's eyes go distant for a moment at the mention of a final test, whatever that was, before focusing back on Faulkner. I still think it's crazy, even with the training I've been doing. Can't that crazy man Agony see the risk here? What if we encounter an IC?
Agony thinks that what we saw yesterday is not the extent of Reaper's powers. He knows full well the risks, but he thinks that if we can put Reaper in an even more stressful situation, we can...
Reaper stopped listening. They wanted them to use their powers again. That would mean going back to that place with the voices and the eyes. Even now, they could see them in their mind. The Watchers. Hundreds, maybe thousands of eyes. They looked at them, through them. They felt ice run through their veins. The eyes hated them. They wanted them dead. They told Reaper they were terrible. A monster. If Reaper went back to that place, could they resist their call? Just then, Reaper noticed that Claire and Faulkner had stopped talking. They were both looking at them. They stammered. I think I might be able to learn enough to protect myself in a week, but don't expect anything like what happened yesterday. I really have no idea how I did that. Reaper was lying, mostly, but they would do anything not to have to use those powers again. Faulkner looked satisfied, if somewhat disappointed.
Good. Now, you two, rest up. Your training begins tomorrow.
With that, he finished eating and got up to leave, waving goodbye to the two of them as he went. Reaper took a few bites of the food. It was bland, but warm, and they found that they were hungrier than they thought. There was silence as Reaper and Claire ate. Most of the other people eating had left, and only a few stragglers remained, talking with voices hushed. Reaper put down their fork, feeling full, and looked up at Claire. She hadn't eaten as much as Reaper, and so had been watching them. I thought you said we didn't need to eat. I sure felt hungry. We still feel it when we need energy. You done? Reaper looked at their empty plate. Yeah, so what now? Well, we have the whole day to ourselves, and tonight, well, how would you like to get a little fresh air? Reaper stared at her. You don't mean, yep, but it has to be tonight. Some of the guards are sick in the infirmary, so they're short-manned, which means we can sneak our way to the surface. It was risky, but Reaper was excited. And until then, she winked at him. Well, until then, I guess I'll be giving you the grand tour.